Hello. This resource is for managers looking at the creation of a whistleblowing policy. In our first programme, we looked at what it is, why you would want one, and the implications for managers and employees. Now we'll look at the creation of a whistleblowing policy, its contents, how you would communicate it, and the issues that arise for management and for employees. Of course, the building of effective policies, including whistleblowing, depends on just how earnestly organisations wish to take the detection of wrongdoing or misconduct in the first place. Taking on from that, unless there are effective procedures in place which demonstrate the organisation's willingness to address concerns, as well as encouraging and enabling staff to express concerns, employees are more likely to take their concerns outside the organisation, perhaps to the media. Many organisations are under risk of regulatory sanction if there's a failure to report. For example, in many sectors such as financial services, there is specific whistleblowing protection for staff in providing information or assisting in investigation of regulatory matters. Codes of corporate governance can include provisions by which staff may, in confidence, raise concerns about possible improprieties. For example, in the Employment Rights Act in the UK, there are provisions protecting those who disclose information about certain kinds of wrongdoing. This is replicated in the protected disclosure legislation in Ireland. See our specific resource on this legislation. A whistleblowing policy should include a clear statement that malpractice is taken seriously by your organisation, and an indication of the sorts of matters regarded as malpractice, such as fraud, corruption, or covering up any of these. It should include respect for the confidentiality of staff raising concerns if they wish, and the opportunity to raise concerns outside the line management structure. It should put an emphasis on raising concerns in good faith. It should provide protection from unfair treatment and victimisation. And it should provide an indication of the way in which concerns may be raised outside the organisation. And that's an area where Ford HR solutions can be particularly helpful to organisations. Ideally, organisations should have external support, which may provide independent support to employees and managers who are unsure whether or how to raise a workplace concern which may affect the organisation as a whole. Silence can be extremely costly to organisations and to individual employees. Some organisations have paid a high price in terms of compensation, cost of recovery, and loss of reputation, arising out of issues that could be related to the movement of information in the organisation. If you stop to think about our experience within Ireland, with financial services, public services, childcare, religious organisations, there are worldwide examples such as the BBC, Enron, WorldCom. There are hundreds of others. While smaller and less dramatic, they indicate to us that it's a more pervasive problem than you might have imagined. All too often, behind famous products, broken processes and mistaken decisions are people who choose to remain silent rather than speak up. There are many benefits to an organisational whistleblowing policy. By deterring malpractice and avoiding crisis management, it can contribute to the efficient running of the organisation. By providing accountability, a whistleblowing policy can help to maintain the organisation's reputation. It can help to ensure compliance with the law and minimise external disclosures. It's best practice with minimal cost impact. A whistleblowing policy can enhance the public perception of the organisation. It can increase trust with customers, clients, citizens, and staff. A whistleblowing policy can assist in attracting and retaining high-quality staff. And it can enhance risk management and the relationship with regulators where appropriate. It's worth making the point to organisations that sincerely understanding and enhancing the values you espouse can only be meaningful if an ethics of responsibility or an ethics in business principle and attitude is concretely encouraged, defined, and acted upon. We need to see it in the behaviour of managers and employees. In the case of your own organisation, here are a couple of questions. How likely do you think it is that if an employee raised a concern about serious malpractice, that they would do so with their line manager? If they did raise it with their line manager, how confident do you think that employee would be that the line manager would deal properly with such a concern? Do you think that the employee would be confident that in raising the issue with their line manager, they would suffer no reprisals for raising the concern? Or if the concern was about the line manager, or they didn't feel they could raise it with the line manager, how likely do you think it is that the employee would then go on to raise the matter with more senior management? And how confident do you think your colleagues would be that your organisation would ensure that they would suffer no reprisals for raising a concern in good faith? It's a key cultural question that if a fellow employee raised a concern about serious malpractice, and as a result of raising that concern, someone else was disciplined, do you think his or her colleagues would feel that he or she had done the right thing, that he or she had acted in the best interests of the organisation, or that he or she had been disloyal, was a troublemaker, was brave or foolhardy, and not the sort of person other employees would want to work with? Of course, there are risks in introducing an organisational whistleblowing policy. What do you do if you don't have senior management support? Well, you can mitigate that, and obviously you should seek to do so by working on the communication of expectations and responsibilities to the management population. The communication should obviously cascade from the very top of the organisation. You can also institute mechanisms like putting the whistleblowing policy as an ongoing agenda item for all management and staff meetings. You really do need trade union or employee representative support. And if you have problems in that area, you should seek to mitigate them by engaging with them and, if possible, providing for a joint communication. This can be an area where there is a common interest in introducing an effective policy which works well and which ensures the proper protection of employees in their use of the policy. If the policy doesn't have credibility with staff, this really becomes a management issue. Their involvement, but particularly their attitude and behaviour towards the policy, is very important, and to demonstrate a changed behaviour on the implementation of the policy is very important. If there are problems with communication, you can mitigate that by ensuring you have a very decent communications plan, that it's signed off at all levels, that it's worked through to the detail of even the slides and scripts and whatever communication mechanisms are being used. If you have a large organisation, see if you can appoint representatives in the different work areas. If it's not sustained properly, obviously that becomes a serious risk to the policy. There are various mechanisms you can put in place, but putting the whistleblowing policy as part of all induction and management training ensures that it's important and its centrality to the operation of the organisation is continually put before staff. Policy not being used by staff. This is something which will become evident on the operation of the policy over time. It will be identified by a steering committee which will be put in place to manage the implementation and operation of the policy. It's also important to ensure the ongoing visibility of top management as supporters and drivers of the policy. A helpful way to summarise the last slide is to look at the assumptions that we have about a whistleblowing policy being effective. The absence of support from senior management or employee representatives, trade unions, will mean that the whistleblowing policy has no credibility. The policy will also get into difficulties without a sustainment process which lasts over a significant period of time. It should, for example, form part of induction and management training, senior management meetings, and have a management steering committee. Without support from HR, it can be more difficult to implement the policy with management groupings and harder to identify those that require other interventions, such as training. I hope you found this resource helpful. Remember, we're available to you with free advice, support in addressing cultural concerns through ethical audits, and facilitating an action plan which may result, including the drafting of appropriate procedures, supported by training and other sustainment processes. We have the experience and expertise to add value to your needs.